March the 2nd, 2025, 5:42 a.m. Houston police respond to a welfare call. Minutes later, officers find Vanessa Taylor, 45, dead on her bedroom floor. Her phone shows one unread message: "I'm here." 12 hours earlier, she'd picked up Marcus Lane, 32, who'd traveled from Atlanta to meet her for the first time. By sunrise, she was gone, and he was already 2 states away. What happened between them that night? Love? Disgust? Or something neither could control? To understand it, we go back to where their story began. Marcus Lane was born in Atlanta, Georgia, on June 12, 1993. He grew up in a part of the city where paychecks vanished before the month ended, and where children learned early to keep their heads down. His father left before Marcus turned 5. His mother, Charlene, worked nights as a nurse aide, often returning home just as her son was leaving for school. Some mornings, they'd exchange a few words over cereal. Other mornings, only a look. The absence of conversation became its own kind of language, one that taught Marcus to hold things in. He was the quiet kid who noticed everything. Teachers called him respectful. Classmates called him distant. What they didn't see was how often he moved. Between 5th grade and graduation, his mother changed apartments 4 times, chasing affordable rent in safer streets. Each move left Marcus starting over. New schools, new faces, the same unease of being the outsider. At home, Charlene repeated the same line whenever bills piled up. "Don't depend on anyone, son. People let you down." It became the rule that shaped his adulthood. By 16, he was already working part-time at a neighborhood garage. The owner liked him for his steadiness and quiet focus. But beneath that calm exterior lived a boy who feared being overlooked. His mother's exhaustion had hardened him, but her silence had also left him craving approval he didn't know how to ask for. He learned that staying useful earned him attention. Compliments gave him validation, and when they stopped coming, he grew uneasy. Romance for Marcus was unfamiliar territory. His first serious relationship ended when his girlfriend told him he was too defensive. A later partner said he turned cold whenever she brought up his childhood. He didn't understand how to discuss emotions he'd never been allowed to show. Whenever he felt judged or misunderstood, he withdrew completely, leaving his partners confused. One ex once told a friend, "Marcus acts like if you disagree with him, you've betrayed him." It wasn't anger at first. It was fear of being left again. In his late 20s, that fear began shaping everything. He bounced between jobs at small repair shops, saving what he could, keeping to himself. Co-workers described him as polite, but intense. If something bothered him, you could tell, one said years later. He didn't yell, but his whole face changed. He had few friends and spent most evenings scrolling on his phone, drifting between car forums and social media, where validation came easily and rejection could be ignored. By 2023, Marcus was living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment outside Atlanta. He still called his mother once a week, but the calls rarely lasted more than a few minutes. He talked more to strangers online than to anyone in his real life. The internet gave him a place to feel seen without being questioned, and it was there that he stumbled into a conversation that would change everything. A woman from Texas had posted about selling a used car. She was older, warm in her tone, and quick to thank him for offering advice. At first, it was casual. Questions about mileage and repairs. But something about her kindness drew him in. They started messaging outside the listing, sharing small pieces of their lives. Favorite songs, work stories, sleepless nights. She laughed at his jokes. He liked how she spelled his name in full, Marcus, never Mark. In the beginning, it looked harmless. 2 adults talking online. But for Marcus, who'd spent years trying to prove himself to everyone, her attention felt like air after suffocation. She didn't know his past, his temper, or his insecurity. She just listened. And that kind of acceptance was rare enough for him to mistake it for love. He told a coworker one morning, "I think I finally met someone who gets me." The man laughed and said, "Online, be careful with that." Marcus smiled, but the warning stayed in his head. For months, he built an image of who she was and who he could be with her. A fresh start. a chance to be understood without having to explain himself. But as spring 2025 approached, those same emotions that once kept him quiet began to re-emerge as something else. Expectation, possessiveness, the need to control what he couldn't define, and as he packed a small bag for a trip to Texas, his mother asked if he was sure about it. Marcus replied, "Yeah, I'm sure this one's different." He wasn't wrong. It would be different, just not in the way he hoped. Before we move further, take a moment to stay with this story. Subscribe, share, and follow along, because what happens next isn't about distance or timing. It's about two people who both thought they were ready for love, and how one weekend proved neither of them truly was. Vanessa Taylor was born in Beaumont, Texas, in the summer of 1978, the kind of small Gulf Coast city where everyone knew each other's grandparents and where the rhythm of life followed church bells and weather reports. She was the oldest of three girls, raised in a brick house on a quiet street where her mother kept lace curtains in every window, and her father taught Sunday school at the local church. Sundays meant family dinners, hymns playing from a radio on the counter, and her mother's constant reminder that grace wasn't something you earned, it was something you gave. Vanessa absorbed that lesson early, though life would later test how much grace one person could give before breaking. When she was 14, everything shifted. Her parents' marriage, once the anchor of their household, collapsed in the space of a few painful months. One night, her father left without finishing his coffee, and the silence that followed stayed with her longer than his memory. Her mother, suddenly both parent and provider, moved the family into a small duplex closer to town. Vanessa started babysitting after school and learned how to keep her sisters calm when her mother came home late from work. Those years carved out a version of her that was both responsible and tender, a young girl trying to believe that love could survive absence. In high school, she was quiet but admired. Friends remembered her as the one who listened more than she spoke. She joined the church youth choir, not because she wanted attention, but because music was the one place she felt steady. When she sang, people listened, and for a girl whose home had been split apart by arguments, that small acknowledgement mattered. Her friends would say later that even as a teenager, Vanessa carried herself with an old soul's kind of patience, like someone waiting for something better without saying it out loud. She married young, just 21. Her first husband was a local construction worker she met after choir rehearsal. The early days were full of laughter, simple meals, and quiet dreams about a bigger house someday. But over time, those dreams gave way to secrets and long nights alone. He drank more, talked less, and one evening confessed he'd been seeing someone else. Vanessa packed her things the next morning without raising her voice. Her mother said, "You've got your daddy's heart, too soft for this world." She only replied, "Maybe softness is the only thing I have left." A few years later, she married again, hoping to rebuild what she'd lost. Her second husband was older, steadier, or so she thought, but steadiness turned to control. Every decision, every phone call, every paycheck became his to question. By 35, she walked away again, this time determined that no one would ever make her feel small for needing love. By the time she turned 45, Vanessa had moved to a suburb outside Houston. Her home was modest but full of life, a place that smelled of lavender and fresh laundry, with a garden blooming along the fence line. She worked at an auto parts warehouse, clocking in before sunrise and finishing early enough to water her plants before dinner. Her co-workers liked her for her calm energy. She remembered birthdays, offered rides home, and always ended her shifts with a polite, "Y'all take care now." They described her as gentle, forgiving to a fault, the kind of person who could comfort you even when she couldn't comfort herself. Her free time was simple. On Saturdays, she went to the farmer's market for fresh flowers and peaches. On Sundays, she sang in the church choir, her voice carrying softly through the pews. She played old R&B records when she cooked, the crackle of vinyl filling her kitchen with songs about love and loss. But beneath the rhythm of her routines lived something quieter, a fear that time was passing faster than second chances. She once told a friend, "I don't need someone perfect. I just need someone who stays." That sentence summed up her entire view of love. She didn't want luxury. She wanted a connection. She didn't need promises of forever, just the comfort of consistency. Yet even with her warmth, loneliness lingered. She filled it with work, music, and kindness toward others. But at night, she still caught herself scrolling through old pictures, wondering if she'd missed her last real chance at companionship. By 2023, her life had settled into a calm pattern, steady, predictable, safe. Then, one evening, while browsing a marketplace site to sell her old car, she received a message from a stranger in Georgia offering advice about repairs. It seemed innocent enough, but that message would become the beginning of the final chapter of her life, the moment when hope met danger in the disguise of attention she had long been waiting for. And as we move into that part of her story, remember this. Vanessa wasn't searching for excitement or wealth. She was searching for someone who would make her feel seen again. That search, tragically, would lead her straight to Marcus Lane. If you're watching from somewhere out there, drop your location in the comments below. And if you're still here with us just right, I am still here. Let's see who's still watching. In late October 2023, the Texas heat had finally begun to fade, and Vanessa Taylor spent her Saturday morning scrolling through her phone at the kitchen table. She had just listed her used Nissan Altima on Facebook Marketplace, a car she'd loved but could no longer afford to maintain. Her post was simple, a few photos, and a caption that read, "Clean interior, runs well, just needs a little work." A few hours later, a message appeared. It came from an account belonging to a man in Georgia. The name read Marcus Lane. He wrote, "I can help you fix it cheaper if you like." What began as a straightforward conversation about a car slowly turned into something else. Vanessa thanked him for the advice. Marcus replied quickly, telling her about his work as a mechanic, throwing in a light joke about mechanics being the best therapists money can't buy. That small attempt at humor caught her attention. From there, the chat extended beyond spark plugs and brake pads. Within days, they were messaging every night, the tone shifting from helpful to personal. Marcus told her about his job, his long hours, and how he preferred quiet nights at home to loud bars. Vanessa told him about her garden, her church choir, and how sometimes she missed having someone to share dinner with. They were careful at first, asking polite questions, keeping things surface level. But loneliness has a way of lowering walls. And soon, their messages grew longer, warmer, and filled with details that only two people searching for connection would share. By November, their chats became routine. Vanessa made coffee before work and checked her messages before leaving the house. Marcus sent her good morning texts from his shop in Atlanta. When the shop closed, he'd message again. "How was your day?" he'd ask. She'd reply, "Busy, but hearing from you makes it better." It was the kind of simple comfort both had been missing for years. One night, Vanessa typed, "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be truly happy again." Marcus stared at the blinking cursor before replying, "You will be. You already sound like someone who deserves it." That exchange became a turning point. Their words started to fill spaces that real life could not. Their late-night calls began shortly after Thanksgiving. The first lasted an hour, then 3. Soon they were talking until sunrise. They laughed about the little things, her neighbor's noisy dog, his co-worker's bad jokes. She told him she hadn't stayed up that late on purpose since she was 25. He replied, "Then I guess I'm doing something right." It was easy, natural, and for Vanessa, intoxicating. For Marcus, it was validation, the kind he never got in person. By Christmas 2023, their relationship existed entirely through screens, but it felt tangible. Vanessa sent him photos of her tree. Marcus sent one of his shop's small holiday potluck. He told her, "I don't usually care about holidays, but this year feels different." She smiled at the message longer than she wanted to admit. The distance between Georgia and Texas suddenly felt smaller. What they didn't share was just as powerful as what they did. Marcus never told her that work had slowed down, or that he was behind on rent. He hid the frustration that came with seeing his friends move ahead while he stayed stuck. Vanessa never admitted how self-conscious she felt about her body or the fear that a younger woman could easily replace her. They were both performing a version of themselves, the ones they hoped the other person would fall in love with. By February 2024, their conversations had evolved into something deeper, though neither had used the word love yet. Vanessa told her sister about Marcus, calling him the sweetest man she'd ever met. Her sister teased, "Sweet online maybe, but do you even know this guy?" Vanessa brushed it off. "You'd understand if you talked to him," she said. "He listens." That, to her, was everything. Marcus told his coworker he'd been talking to someone serious. The coworker laughed. "Man, don't get catfished." Marcus shook his head. "She's real. She's good for me." The way he said it made it clear. This wasn't just another chat. It was something he'd begun to depend on. Both had grown attached in ways they didn't recognize. Psychologists call it emotional reinforcement, the brain's response to constant validation. Every message, every call released a small rush of comfort, convincing them it was connection, not dependency. Vanessa started falling asleep with her phone on her pillow. Marcus started bringing his charger everywhere he went. By March 2024, they spoke like a couple who'd known each other for years. They shared dreams about traveling together, simple plans like cooking dinner side by side or watching a movie on the couch. Vanessa texted one night, "We're meant for each other." Marcus replied, "I was thinking the same thing." It was the first time he'd said it back. Their connection, though digital, felt real enough to blur the lines between fantasy and commitment. Each became a mirror for the other's loneliness, a reflection of what they wanted most, to be seen, to be wanted, to matter to someone again. But behind every comforting exchange was a truth they didn't face. They had built an entire emotional world without ever sharing a physical one. And soon, that distance, the thing that had once made them feel safe, would become the stage for tragedy. Before we continue, I want to hear from you watching. Have you ever trusted someone you've only met online? Drop your thoughts and where you're watching from in the comments. If you're still here, type "I'm still here," because what happens next will show how quickly affection can turn into consequence when loneliness finds Wi-Fi. February 2025. Winter was fading across Atlanta, and the city carried that familiar in-between feeling. Warm enough for short sleeves during the day, but still cold enough at night to make you reach for a jacket. Inside a cluttered repair shop on Memorial Drive, Marcus Lane stood beside an old Chevrolet with his phone buzzing in his pocket. He wiped his hands on a towel and glanced at the message. "So, are you still coming?" It was from Vanessa. The corner of his mouth lifted. He typed back, "Yeah, I already booked the ticket." He looked at the time, checked his wallet twice, and felt the smallest wave of nervous excitement in his chest. His coworker across the bay, a man named Terrence, noticed his distracted grin. "You look like somebody who's got plans," Terrence said, laughing. Marcus replied, "Something like that. Just going to see somebody." "She must be fine," Terrence teased. Marcus chuckled quietly, tightening the bolt on the engine before answering. "She's real. That's enough for me." The following evening, Marcus closed the shop earlier than usual. He stopped by his apartment, folded 2 shirts, a pair of jeans, and his best sneakers into a small black duffel bag. He didn't pack much. He'd told his mother he was heading out of town for the weekend, and when she asked where, he said, "Texas." Charlene Lane, who had spent her life cleaning hospital floors and raising her son alone, gave a tired laugh. "You're always chasing something far away, Marcus. Just make sure it's worth the gas money." He smiled and kissed her on the cheek. "It's not like that, Ma. I'm just visiting a friend." She looked at him for a long second, sighed, and said softly, "Well, call me when you get there." He promised he would. Marcus had never been on a bus that long before. He printed his ticket the next morning. Greyhound, Atlanta to Houston. Departure 5:10 p.m. on February 28th. Expected arrival 7:00 a.m. the next day. He stuffed it into his wallet and glanced at the mirror before leaving home. The reflection staring back looked tired but hopeful. the kind of hope that comes after too many disappointments. He locked his door, carried his duffel down the narrow staircase, and stepped into the chill evening air. The city was busy, lights flickering on as workers poured out of office buildings. He moved quietly through the crowd, another man with somewhere to be. Hundreds of miles away, Vanessa Taylor woke up early that same morning in her Houston suburb, unable to shake the excitement bubbling inside her. She stood in her kitchen holding her phone, rereading their last conversation. "I'm really doing this," she whispered to herself. She brewed coffee, turned on the radio, and began cleaning the house, even though it was already spotless. The sound of the vacuum mixed with the hum of an old soul song coming through the speakers. Around noon, she drove to a nearby store and picked up groceries: milk, orange juice, a few things for breakfast. She stopped at the home section and grabbed new sheets. They were light blue, soft, and still sealed in plastic. She smiled as she placed them in her cart. Her sister Monica called while she was checking out. "You sound chipper," Monica said. Vanessa laughed. "You'd be too if you were finally meeting someone who makes you feel seen." There was a pause on the line before Monica answered. "Just be careful, okay?" Vanessa responded gently. "I'm always careful. You worry too much." After the call, she sat in her car for a moment, looking at the small bag of groceries on the seat beside her. The excitement didn't fade. It grew. She texted Marcus, "Just finished cleaning up. I can't wait." He replied within minutes, "Me neither," counting down. At the shop, Marcus wrapped up his final shift before leaving. The air smelled faintly of oil and rubber. His coworker Terrence shouted from across the room, "Hey man, when you coming back?" Marcus shrugged. "A couple days maybe. Don't know yet." Terrence wiped his hands on his shirt and said, "You got that look. That nervous but happy look." Marcus laughed. "Guess we'll see how it goes." Before clocking out, he took a photo of himself leaning against the shop door and sent it to Vanessa. The caption read, "Last shift before I see you." She heart-reacted immediately. Later that day, he arrived at the Greyhound terminal, the kind of place where fluorescent lights buzz and announcements echo endlessly. The smell of diesel fuel filled the air. Families hugged goodbye, travelers waited in lines that moved too slowly, and Marcus found his seat near the window. He texted her once more. "Boarded. Leaving soon." She replied, "Safe travels. I'll be waiting." He placed his phone face down on his thigh and stared outside as the bus began to roll forward. The city lights blurred into streaks. During the long ride through Alabama and Louisiana, Marcus kept thinking about their late-night calls, her laugh, her voice that always sounded calm no matter how tired she was. He remembered her saying, "I just want someone who can talk to me without yelling." He'd told her, "That's all I want too." He smiled faintly at the memory. The bus was quiet except for the occasional cough or rattle of the wheels over the road seams. At one rest stop in Mississippi, he stretched his legs and called her. She answered on the first ring. "You made it that far already?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "I think we're ahead of schedule." She told him she'd left the porch light on, just in case he arrived before dawn. Before hanging up, she said, "Marcus?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for coming." While he traveled through the night, Vanessa stayed awake. She folded laundry that didn't need folding, double-checked the locks, and made sure everything looked welcoming. Her phone stayed within reach the whole time. Around midnight, she texted him a photo of the living room. The caption read, "Can't believe this is happening." He sent a smile emoji and replied, "Me too." She smiled to herself, thinking about how rare it was to feel this kind of excitement at her age. At 5:37 a.m. on March 1st, the bus pulled into the Houston station under the pale orange sky. Marcus rubbed his eyes and reached for his bag. He checked his messages. Vanessa had texted just minutes earlier, "I'm in the car, pulling up soon." He replied, "I see you." Outside the window, her silver sedan approached the curb slowly. He could see her through the windshield, hands on the steering wheel, floral dress, a nervous smile forming as their eyes met for the first time. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and exhaled. The door opened, and for a moment, Time seemed to still. He stepped down from the bus, gripping his bag, and walked toward her. She got out, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and said, "You must be tired." He nodded. "Little bit, yeah." There was an awkward pause, the kind that only happens when digital familiarity meets physical reality. Then she smiled wider and said, "Well, you're finally here." He answered, "Told you I'd make it." They laughed softly, the kind of laughter that carries both relief and shyness. She opened the passenger door for him, and as he slid inside, the car filled with quiet music from the radio. They didn't talk much on the drive, just exchanged glances, small smiles, and the occasional nervous comment about traffic. When they reached her neighborhood, the morning light had turned golden. Her house looked neat, every curtain straight, the porch light still glowing. She parked, turned off the ignition, and looked over at him. "Welcome to Texas," she said. He grinned. "Feels good already." She laughed and stepped out, walking toward the front door with her keys jingling softly in her hand. He followed behind her, taking in the smell of fresh-cut grass and the faint warmth rising from the driveway. That moment, simple, quiet, filled with anticipation, was the kind of moment people wait years to feel. The front door opened, and Vanessa turned slightly to him, smiling. "Come on in," she said, her voice light and sure. Marcus took one long breath and crossed the threshold into a house he had only ever seen through photos. The door closed gently behind them. The ride to her neighborhood was calm, filled with soft conversation and long pauses that weren't uncomfortable, just new. Vanessa asked if he was hungry. He said he could eat whatever's easy. The car radio played old R&B tunes, and she hummed along under her breath. He noticed and said, "You really do sing all the time." She laughed. "Told you." Outside, Houston was already waking up. Joggers, delivery trucks, a few early commuters. When they pulled into her driveway, a neighbor watering her lawn called out, "That him, Nessa?" Vanessa smiled wide. "He's the one I told you about." The woman laughed and waved. Marcus looked down shyly, unaccustomed to that kind of attention. Inside, Vanessa led him through the house, pointing out framed photos on the wall, family, choir members, a few snapshots from her younger years. "You've got a nice place," he said. "It's just home," she replied, "but thank you." By evening, the house had filled with warmth and sound. They'd spent the afternoon talking in the living room, exchanging stories about their childhoods. She told him about growing up in Beaumont, about her sisters and her late father's love of music. He shared bits of his life in Atlanta, keeping his sentences short, but honest enough to feel real. Around 7 p.m., she ordered takeout from a nearby diner. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and cornbread. He insisted on paying. She refused. They met halfway when she said, "You can get dessert next time." After dinner, she brought out a half-empty bottle of wine. "I'm more of a beer guy," he said, eyeing it. "Well," she smiled, "you're in Texas now." They both laughed. The conversation drifted easily at first. He complimented her cooking, saying, "This is better than anything I've had all year." She blushed, brushing the compliment off but secretly savoring it. He asked about her favorite songs. She played one on her phone, and they sang along to the chorus. The room felt alive, two people rediscovering what simple joy sounded like. Later, they sat on the couch with the TV muted, just talking. She teased him for how serious his face looked when he was thinking. "You're doing that frown again," she said. "That's my listening face," he answered. They laughed, and for a moment, it felt as though the walls around them had softened. But as the hours passed, small cracks began to appear in their rhythm. When she talked about her job, he glanced at his phone. She noticed. Her tone dipped slightly, and she asked, "You bored already?" He looked up, caught off guard. "No, just checking something." "You've been checking something all night," she replied gently, half joking, half testing him. He put the phone down, smiling in an attempt to smooth it over. "I'm here, I promise." The tension lasted only seconds, but it left a faint awkwardness behind, one neither addressed. He asked about her ex-husbands. She paused before answering. "Let's not do that tonight." He nodded, took another sip of wine, and said, "Fair enough." The wine loosened them both. She poured another glass, her voice growing softer. "I still can't believe you're sitting here," she said. "I've been waiting to meet you for months." He leaned back, letting out a quiet breath. "Feels different in person," he said. "Better?" she asked. "Yeah, realer." She smiled at that word. "Good. I was worried you'd think I catfished you or something." He laughed, shaking his head. "Nah, you're exactly who I thought you were." For a moment, silence filled the space between them. Not the uncomfortable kind, but one heavy with newness. By 10 p.m., the bottle was nearly empty. The living room lights had dimmed to a soft glow. They sat closer now, voices quieter, movements slower. The air carried a mixture of perfume, food, and the faint burn of candle wax. Vanessa rested her head back against the couch cushion and said, "You know, it's been a long time since I let someone sit here with me." Marcus replied, "Then I guess I should make it count." She smiled, her eyes meeting his. They stayed that way, talking in fragments about everything: music, travel, the kind of houses they liked. Every sentence built on the one before, weaving comfort and curiosity. At one point, she reached for her phone to show him an old photo from her choir days. He leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the screen. "You look happy there," he said. She nodded. "I was." He handed the phone back, but kept looking at her instead of the picture. "You still are," he said. She laughed softly. "Don't say things like that. You'll make me believe them." "Maybe that's the point," he replied. The words hung between them longer than either expected. As the night wore on, the mix of tiredness and alcohol dulled the edges of conversation. Their sentences slowed. She stood up, gathered the empty plates, and took them to the sink. From the kitchen, she called, "You want some water?" "Sure," he said. He watched her move around the kitchen with easy familiarity, her dress catching the light. She turned, smiling. "What?" "Nothing," he said. "Just watching you." She shook her head playfully. "You better stop before I get shy." He laughed. "You don't seem like the shy type." "Maybe not tonight," she said. They carried their drinks to the back porch. The night air was cooler than expected, a faint breeze rustling the trees. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the hum of distant traffic. She sat on the porch swing, and he stood by the railing. "It's peaceful here," he said. "Quieter than I'm used to." "That's why I love it," she replied. "Everything slows down." He nodded, staring out at the dark street. "Sometimes slowing down feels strange." "You'll get used to it," she said. If you're following this story and you care about how quickly trust can turn into something complicated, make sure you're subscribed. Share this with someone you care about, because connection can be beautiful, but it can also remind us how fragile people really are when all they want is to belong. It was just after midnight when the laughter faded. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of the wall clock in the hallway. Empty glasses sat on the coffee table beside the half-finished bottle of wine. Vanessa leaned back on the couch, her voice low and sleepy. "You sure you're not too tired?" Marcus smiled faintly. "No, I'm good." She stood, gathered the glasses, and placed them in the sink. He followed her to the kitchen doorway, leaning against the frame. The soft overhead light cast a warm glow across her shoulders as she turned toward him. For a long moment, neither spoke. It was the kind of silence that feels charged, uncertain, but not unpleasant. She smiled gently and said, "You don't talk much when you're nervous." He chuckled under his breath. "Guess I'm just trying to get used to being here." They moved back to the living room. Music still played quietly from her phone. An old R&B song she said always made her feel calm. "You like it?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "It's nice." She sat beside him again, closer this time. "You can relax," she said softly, laughing a little. I don't bite. Didn't say you did, he replied with a small grin. What followed wasn't rushed or careless. It was two lonely people trying to bridge the gap between comfort and connection. She rested her hand on his arm. He didn't pull away. He whispered something about how she smelled good, and she smiled, brushing her hair behind her ear. For a while, the world outside disappeared, but somewhere between affection and intimacy, something shifted. Marcus tensed suddenly, his body stiffening as his expression changed. Vanessa noticed first, confused, whispering, "What's wrong?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes darted, unfocused, then fixed on her. He leaned back, face tightening, and said, almost under his breath, "Hold on. Wait." The warmth in his voice vanished. She frowned, reaching for his hand. "Marcus?" He stood abruptly, stepping back. "What's wrong?" she asked again, voice now uneasy. He shook his head, muttering, "I saw something. Hold on, I saw something." She blinked, unsure what he meant. "What are you talking about?" "I just..." He hesitated, then blurted, "Something moved." Vanessa froze. "What do you mean something moved?" she asked, her tone rising with confusion. He didn't answer, just stared at her with a mix of shock and disgust. He backed away slightly, covering his nose, and said sharply, "What is that smell?" She looked at him, mortified. "Marcus, stop. It's nothing. I told you I wasn't feeling well." His breathing grew shallow. "No," he said louder. "No, that's not normal." She shook her head desperately. "I have an infection. I was going to see the doctor next week." He interrupted her, his voice cracking. "You tricked me." The words hit her like a slap. "What? Trick you? Marcus, what are you saying?" "You should have told me," he shouted, pacing toward the wall. "Told you what?" "That you were..." He didn't finish. He just waved his hands, unable to find words strong enough for what he thought he saw. The tension in the room grew thick. Vanessa, now trembling, pulled her robe tighter around herself. "Marcus, please listen to me," she said. "It's just an infection. I've been dealing with it for weeks." He stared at her in disbelief. "You expect me to believe that?" "It's the truth," she said firmly, tears welling. "You don't have to act like this." He shook his head again, muttering to himself, "I knew something was off. I knew it." She tried to step closer. "Please don't talk to me like that." He stepped back again. "Don't touch me." The tone of his voice had changed. Low, controlled, but full of something raw and defensive. Vanessa was crying now, not from fear, but from shame. "I was embarrassed, okay?" she said. "I didn't know how to explain it. It's been bothering me for a while, but it's not what you think." He wouldn't look at her. His jaw clenched, his fists curling at his sides. "You should have said something," he said, his voice trembling. "You don't hide that from somebody." "I didn't hide anything," she said through tears. "I just didn't want you to think I was disgusting." The word hung between them. Marcus flinched as if struck by it. "Well, what did you expect me to think?" For a moment, neither moved. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and Vanessa's uneven breathing. "Marcus," she said quietly, "you're overreacting. Please, sit down. Let's talk." But he wasn't listening anymore. His mind had already twisted what he saw into something unrecognizable. Whether it was the alcohol, exhaustion, or a fragment of paranoia triggered by disgust, something in him snapped away from logic. He muttered almost to himself, "You made a fool of me." She whispered, "No, I didn't. I care about you." "Don't lie to me," he barked. She flinched. He turned toward the window, running a hand over his face. "You should have told me before I came here," he said. "You think this is something you hide?" She wiped her eyes, voice breaking. "I told you. I was embarrassed." "Embarrassed?" he repeated, voice sharp. "Embarrassed doesn't mean lying." "I didn't lie," she screamed suddenly, her voice shaking the air. "I didn't lie to you, Marcus." For the first time that night, her tone carried anger instead of pleading. He turned toward her, his face flushed, eyes wide. Marcus, she said again, quieter this time. I'm sick. That's all. I'm not dirty. I'm not lying. I'm just sick. He stared at her, breathing heavy, his mind spinning between empathy and pride. The idea of compassion fought with humiliation, and humiliation won. He sat on the edge of the couch, head in his hands. I can't believe this, he muttered. I came all this way. And I didn't ask you to. She snapped back, voice trembling with hurt. He looked up sharply. So what? I'm supposed to feel sorry now. No, she said. You're supposed to understand. In that single exchange, every bit of tenderness from earlier dissolved. He stood up again, pacing across the room. Understand what? That you let me touch you knowing something was wrong? It's not what you think, she cried. You're not listening. He turned on her suddenly, voice raised. No, you're not listening. You had a chance to tell me the truth and you didn't. Because I was scared, she shouted back. The argument echoed through the small house, sharp and emotional. Her voice wavered between apology and frustration. His was laced with shame he couldn't admit to feeling. He was angry not just at her, but at himself. For feeling repulsed, for feeling deceived, for caring at all. That mix of pride and disgust left no room for reason. The emotional balance of the night had vanished completely, replaced by something colder, more defensive, and impossible to undo. He stood near the doorway, his breathing uneven. I need to step outside, he said. Go ahead, she whispered. But don't leave angry. He didn't answer. He just turned the handle, stepping out onto the porch where the night air hit him like a jolt. He leaned against the railing, staring into the dark, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Inside, Vanessa sat on the couch, her hands trembling, whispering to herself, "It's just an infection." Why couldn't he understand that? As he stood outside, the weight of embarrassment and disbelief tangled inside him. Pride told him he'd been wronged. Emotion told him he'd overreacted. But shame, quiet, corrosive shame, said nothing at all. It sat with him, growing heavier by the minute. If you were in his place, what would you have done? Would you have believed her explanation? Or would disgust have clouded compassion? Tell me your thoughts below, because what happens when pride replaces empathy can change everything that follows. The argument began not with a shout, but with the sound of the front door closing. The soft click that followed told Vanessa everything she needed to know. Marcus wasn't just taking air, he was trying to calm himself down. She sat in the living room, arms folded tightly, the silence between them stretching longer than she could stand. The clock on the wall ticked toward 12:47 a.m., and the once cozy room that had carried laughter hours earlier now felt cold. When Marcus finally came back inside, his face was unreadable. His steps were slow, deliberate, and his voice came out low. I can't stay here. Vanessa looked up, her expression a mixture of anger and heartbreak. Then don't, she said quietly. If that's how you feel, you can go. Marcus's jaw tightened. Don't say it like that, he muttered. She stood up, voice firmer now. I'm saying it exactly how I mean it. You came here for love, not to judge me. The air thickened instantly. He threw his hands up. Judge you? You lied to me. She shook her head. No, you assumed the worst. You hid something from me, he shot back. I didn't hide it, she said, her voice trembling with exhaustion. I just didn't want to scare you away before I even had the chance to explain. His tone sharpened. You should have told me. I had the right to know. Their words collided, louder, faster, tangled in overlapping accusations. He reached for his bag near the couch, fumbling with the zipper. You know what? I don't even care anymore, he said, his voice breaking under the weight of humiliation. I'm leaving. Vanessa crossed her arms, shaking her head. Go ahead then. That's what men always do. Leave when things get real. He looked up, glaring. Don't turn this into some speech. "It's not a speech," she said. "It's the truth." He began stuffing his clothes into the bag, the sound of fabric and zippers filling the room. "You want me gone?" "Fine." She took a step closer, her voice rising. "You don't get to act like the victim here." He turned sharply. "You think I'm the victim?" "I think you're a coward," she said. The word cut through him. He froze, staring at her as though she'd just crossed a line he didn't even know existed. "Say that again," he warned, his voice trembling. She didn't flinch. "You heard me." He took a step closer, his face inches from hers. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" "Neither do you," she said, trying to sound calm even as her heart raced. He pointed toward the door, his hand shaking. "Move." "No," she said firmly. "You're not walking out of here like this." For a moment, neither moved. The tension sat heavy, like a storm about to break. Marcus turned away, grabbing his phone from the counter. Vanessa reached out, placing her hand on his arm. "Marcus," she said softly, "you don't have to leave angry." He jerked away, the sudden motion knocking a lamp off the table. The crash startled them both, glass splintering across the hardwood floor. "Look what you did," she shouted. "I didn't do anything," he snapped back. "You're the one who keeps pushing." "Because you won't listen," she cried. "I've been trying to explain since it happened." "Explain what?" he roared. "That you made me feel like—" He stopped himself, but the damage was done. Vanessa's voice cracked. "Like what? Like you're too good for me?" He didn't answer. "Say it," she demanded. "Say what you think of me right now." He clenched his fists, his breathing uneven. "You tricked me into feeling sorry for you," he said finally. Her eyes widened, her chest rising with disbelief. "Is that what you really think?" she whispered. He looked away, ashamed of his own words, but too angry to take them back. "You made me believe in something that wasn't real." "No, Marcus," she said, shaking her head slowly. "You did that to yourself." That was the moment everything tipped. He stepped forward again, too close, his voice dropping. "You should stop talking now." "Or what?" she asked, voice steady but her hands trembling. He looked at her, eyes wild with a mix of confusion and wounded pride. "Or I'm going to say something I can't take back." She stared at him, tears forming again. "You already did." The room filled with noise, raised voices, shuffling feet, the dull thud of footsteps on hardwood. Vanessa pointed toward the door, her voice breaking. "Then go. Go back to Atlanta, back to your life, and forget about me." He picked up his bag, muttering under his breath, "You don't have to tell me twice." But when he turned toward the door, she said something that made him stop cold. "You came here for love," she said, her voice rising. "Not to humiliate me." He froze, her words slicing straight through his anger. "Don't put this on me," he said quietly. "It's on both of us." "No," she said sharply. "I gave you honesty. You gave me shame." He spun around so fast the strap of his bag hit the wall. "You think you're some saint?" he shouted. "You lied, Vanessa." "I told you. I was sick," she cried. "You can't control everything." "I'm not trying to control," he yelled back. "I just wanted the truth." "And you had it," she screamed. The sound echoed through the house, raw and sharp. The bag dropped from his hand, thudding against the floor. He took a step toward her, voice shaking. "You don't get it." "Then make me understand," she shouted. "Tell me what you think you saw." "I saw something no man should have to see," he spat. "You made me feel—" He stopped again, his throat tightening. "You made me feel disgusted." The word hung heavy, cruel. Vanessa covered her mouth, her breath catching. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "You can't mean that." He turned away again, pacing. "You should have told me, Vanessa." "And you should have had a heart," she said, her tone exhausted. "You think you're the only one hurt here?" The argument reached a fever pitch. He shouted something unintelligible. She tried to speak over him, and then came the sound of another crash, this time louder. The broken lamp at their feet shifted as he moved too fast, too close. She reached out, pushing him back instinctively. "Stop yelling!" "Don't touch me!" he shouted. She pushed again. "You're scaring me!" "Good," he snapped without thinking. That single word, spat out in anger, was the breaking point. She raised her hand, pointing toward the door again. "Leave my house, Marcus." He turned, his face red, voice trembling. "Don't tell me what to do." She stepped forward, defiant. "Get out." "I said don't tell me." The rest was lost in the chaos of motion. The bag, the table, the glass underfoot. It all blurred into one disordered sound. Then, without thinking, he swung. Once. A dull thud. Her gasp filled the air, small and sharp. Then another strike followed. Anger, shame, confusion, all condensed into seconds that could never be taken back. Silence fell almost immediately after. He stood there, chest heaving, staring at her motionless form on the floor. The sound of his own breathing was deafening. For a long time, he didn't move. His hands trembled, his heart racing so hard it felt like it might stop. Her phone buzzed on the carpet near her hand, her sister's name flashing across the screen. He stared at it, frozen, unable to look away. He dropped to his knees, muttering, "No, no, no," over and over again, as though the words could undo what had just happened. The clock on the wall read 1:14 a.m. He reached for his bag, stumbled backward, and bolted toward the door. The porch light flickered as he stepped out into the cool night air. Behind him, the house was silent. The only sound that remained was the faint vibration of Vanessa's phone on the floor, still buzzing, unanswered. What do you think happened inside Marcus's mind in that final moment? Was it rage, shame, or something deeper, something too broken to name? Tell me in the comments what you think turned a visit for love into a moment that would change everything forever. Saturday, March the 2nd, 2025, 9:06 a.m. The quiet neighborhood on Maplecrest Lane stirred to life as the Texas sun began to rise. A neighbor named Deborah Mills stepped outside to water her plants when she noticed something strange. The side window of Vanessa Taylor's house was cracked open, curtains moving faintly with the breeze. At first, she thought nothing of it. Vanessa was known to air out her home on weekends, but then she heard the faint buzz. Flies, dozens of them, clinging to the glass, their droning breaking the still morning calm. Deborah frowned, leaning closer. "That's odd," she murmured to herself. The smell that followed wasn't gas, but something heavy and wrong. She backed away, uneasy, and pulled out her phone. Minutes later, the 911 call came through to dispatch. "Hi, this is Deborah from Maplecrest Lane," she said, her voice trembling. "I think something's wrong next door. There's a strange smell, and I think there are flies inside." The operator asked, "Do you see any smoke or hear anything unusual?" "No, it's just quiet. Too quiet." Within 10 minutes, Houston police units arrived, lights flashing silently across the empty street. Officers approached the house cautiously. The door was locked. They circled to the back, found the same open window Deborah had described, and forced entry through it. The moment the first officer stepped inside, the smell confirmed what no one wanted to believe. Body cam footage later revealed the scene. The living room appeared undisturbed, but the trail of overturned furniture led down the hallway. In the bedroom, officers found Vanessa Taylor lying motionless beside a shattered lamp, the carpet stained, her phone on the floor still lit with missed calls. The clock on her nightstand read 1:26 a.m. One of the responding officers, trying to keep his composure, radioed in, "We've got a possible homicide. Female, mid-40s. Another officer lifted the phone carefully from the floor, noting the last message received. "Are you okay?" A text from her sister Monica. The timestamp was 1:18 a.m. Detectives arrived shortly after, sealing the perimeter with yellow tape as curious neighbors gathered behind it. A crime scene photographer began documenting every detail: the broken glass, the bruising on Vanessa's wrist, the faint outline of a shoe print near the doorway. The kitchen counter still held the remnants of their dinner from the night before. 2 empty plates, 1 wine glass half full, another knocked over. It looked less like a robbery and more like a moment that had turned violently personal. Detective Laura Fernandez, the lead investigator, reviewed the scene carefully. "Nothing's stolen," she said quietly. "This was anger, not theft." Her partner, Detective Ryan Collins, nodded. "Neighbors said she heard shouting around midnight but thought it was the TV." Laura pointed to the phone bagged by the forensics team. "Pull her call logs and messages. Whoever she was with last night, I want everything." Detectives combed through Vanessa's phone records, tracing the final minutes before her death. The last outgoing message from her phone had been sent at 12:59 a.m. It read simply, "Can we just talk?" There was no reply. Investigators noted that the following activity came from Marcus's number, one incoming message at 1:12 a.m. that said, "Don't text me again." After that, his phone went offline. The unanswered call from Vanessa's sister came a few minutes later, at 1:18 a.m., followed by silence. Meanwhile, forensic technicians dusted for fingerprints across the house. Marcus's prints were found on the wine bottle, her phone, and the bedroom door handle. Blood spatter analysis showed evidence of close-range impact, consistent with blunt force trauma. Investigators also noted defensive bruises on Vanessa's forearm, suggesting she tried to protect herself. Outside, local news crews began arriving. The story spread fast. Woman found dead after meeting long-distance boyfriend. Neighbors told reporters she was kind, trusting, and too forgiving for her own good. Deborah Mills, the one who made the call, said softly, "She told me earlier this week someone special was coming to visit. She looked so happy. I didn't think I'd be the one to find out like this." By 3 p.m., police traced Marcus's bus ticket purchase through his credit card. Surveillance footage from the Houston Greyhound terminal showed him arriving the previous morning with a single bag and leaving hours later in different clothes. A separate video captured him at a gas station near Lake Charles, Louisiana, around 6:40 a.m., buying bottled water and cigarettes. The timestamp aligned perfectly with when Vanessa's sister said her texts stopped going through. Detective Fernandez looked at the footage and said quietly, "He didn't even make it half a day." Later that evening, a warrant was issued across state lines. The case shifted from local homicide to interstate pursuit. The forensic team completed their first pass through the scene at 8:12 p.m., loading evidence bags into unmarked vehicles. As the sun set, the yellow tape fluttered in the wind, the house behind it dark once again, its warmth erased in a single night. Forensics would later confirm what investigators already suspected. Marcus's DNA was found beneath Vanessa's fingernails, her blood on his jacket collar left behind in the trash can by the guest room. It wasn't hard to connect the timeline. He was last online at 1:22 a.m. By 1:30, his phone was already moving east on Interstate 10. Detective Collins, standing outside the scene, turned to his partner and said quietly, "He didn't even give her a chance to explain." Fernandez replied, "He never wanted an explanation. He wanted control." They both stood there, silent for a long moment before she added, "Now we just have to find him before he convinces himself it wasn't his fault." By nightfall, police were coordinating with Louisiana authorities to track the next stop on the bus route. Marcus Lane had vanished into the morning hours, but the trail he left behind, messages, fingerprints, camera footage, spoke louder than anything he could say. Vanessa's phone was logged into evidence, still showing the unread text from her sister. The screen dimmed slowly, fading to black, as if the house itself was shutting its eyes. Thank you for watching and for standing with us as we tell these real stories. This channel exists because of viewers like you. If you've been moved by Vanessa's story, consider joining our community by subscribing or becoming a member today. Your support helps us continue bringing real stories to light and reminding the world that behind every crime, there's a life that mattered. Saturday, March 2nd, 2025, 10:47 p.m. It had been nearly 24 hours since Vanessa Taylor's body was discovered, and more than 16 hours since Marcus Lane had fled Houston. The call came into Baton Rouge police from Texas investigators. Be on the lookout for a 32-year-old male traveling eastbound in a dark hoodie, possible bloodstains on clothing. A gas station attendant on Florida Boulevard noticed him first. A man sitting on the curb beside a vending machine, his head in his hands, a half-empty bottle of water beside him. When patrol officers approached, he didn't run. He simply looked up and muttered, "I know why you're here." His hands shook as he stood. They cuffed him without resistance. He was still wearing the same jeans and jacket, faint traces of blood visible on the collar. At 11:32 p.m., Marcus was booked into the East Baton Rouge Parish Detention Center on a fugitive warrant from Texas. During intake, the officer noted his demeanor as calm but vacant. He spoke little except to say he needed to wash his hands. When questioned about his destination, he said he was just trying to get home. One officer later recalled, "He looked like a man who hadn't slept or eaten in days, but he wasn't afraid. Just empty." At midnight, Texas detectives arrived to conduct the first interview. The room was small, the air heavy with the hum of fluorescent lights. Marcus sat at the metal table, staring at his reflection in the mirrored wall. His knuckles were red, and he kept rubbing his palms together as though the act itself could erase what he'd done. Detective Laura Fernandez began the questioning. "Marcus," she said softly, "you know why we're here." He nodded once, eyes down. "Tell me what happened in that house." His voice came out hoarse. "We argued." "About what?" she asked. "She lied," he said flatly. "About what?" "About herself," he whispered. "She said she was fine. She wasn't fine." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I thought she was decaying." The words hung in the room. Fernandez exchanged a glance with her partner, Detective Collins, then leaned forward. "You thought she was decaying?" Marcus nodded. "There was a smell. I saw something move. I don't even know what it was, but I saw it. I lost control." Collins asked, "So you hit her?" Marcus exhaled heavily, eyes fixed on the table. "I didn't mean to. I panicked. It just happened." Fernandez studied his face. "You didn't try to help her? Call for help?" Marcus looked up sharply, almost offended. "There was nothing to help. You weren't there. You didn't see what I saw." She replied evenly, "You're right. I wasn't there. But I see what she went through." He said nothing. The recording later showed that he blinked slowly, his eyes unfocused, his expression more disturbed than remorseful. He spoke only of disgust, not guilt, not sorrow. "She knew something was wrong," he muttered at one point. "She should have told me. She made me think everything was okay." Fernandez pressed, "And that justified what you did?" He didn't answer. He just whispered again, "I thought she was decaying." By the second hour of interrogation, his tone shifted from defensive to detached. He admitted to striking her more than once, but claimed he didn't know how hard. He said she fell, that there was a lot of blood, and that he just needed to get out. When asked why he took her phone, he shrugged. "I didn't even know I had it," he said, though records showed he'd tried to call his mother from it at 1:48 a.m., less than 30 minutes after the killing. When investigators informed him that Vanessa's autopsy showed nothing resembling decomposition, only a bacterial infection common in untreated cases, he went silent. Fernandez said, "She was sick, Marcus. She wasn't dying. You misunderstood something you didn't want to understand." For the first time, his composure cracked. He lowered his head, muttering, "I didn't want to be tricked." Collins leaned forward. "She wasn't tricking you. You were just ashamed." "Ashamed of what?" Marcus snapped. "Of caring?" "No," Collins said calmly. "Of being wrong." The room fell silent. The clock ticked on the wall. When Marcus finally spoke again, his voice was low and uneven. "It felt like she made a fool out of me." Fernandez replied, "She didn't. She trusted you." His jaw clenched again, the vein in his temple pulsing. "Then why didn't she tell me?" "Because she was embarrassed," Fernandez said, her tone steady. "Not because she wanted to hurt you." He looked away, shaking his head. "You don't get it. It was right there. I saw it." Fernandez leaned closer. You saw what your pride wanted to see. The psychological evaluation conducted later described Marcus as emotionally volatile, displaying traits of fragile masculinity and obsessive self-image. He wasn't psychotic. He wasn't delusional. He was ashamed. Clinical psychologist Dr. Rebecca Myers, who reviewed the case, explained it simply. Some men interpret discomfort as betrayal. They mistake embarrassment for deception, and when their sense of control is threatened, they strike, not because they hate the other person, but because they can't handle feeling powerless. By Monday morning, March 3rd, Marcus was extradited back to Texas, where he faced formal murder charges. During the transport, he barely spoke, except once when an officer asked if he wanted to say anything about Vanessa. Marcus replied, "She shouldn't have lied." The officer looked at him and said, "She didn't lie. You just didn't listen." Marcus said nothing else for the rest of the trip. At the Houston Police Department, detectives reviewed the interrogation footage again. Fernandez remarked, "He never once asked how she died. He already knew. What he can't accept is why he did it." Collins nodded. "It wasn't rage," he said quietly. "It was humiliating." The footage of that interrogation would later become public record, a chilling window into the mind of a man who mistook shame for deception. His hands trembled, but his words stayed cold. In the end, Marcus never cried, never asked for forgiveness, and never once mentioned love. Only disgust. Before we move forward, I want to ask you something. What do you think triggers a person to lose empathy so fast? Is it fear, pride, or something deeper that refuses to face weakness? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because what happened next in court would expose just how fragile control can be when it's built on denial. October 6th, 2025. The courthouse in downtown Houston was packed. Cameras lined the steps, reporters jostled for position, and inside the hum of quiet tension filled the air. After 7 months of preparation, the trial of State versus Marcus Lane began. Marcus entered wearing a gray jumpsuit, thinner than before, his expression unreadable. He didn't glance toward the gallery where Vanessa Taylor's family sat, their hands clasped tightly together. The prosecutor's opening statement was brief, but cutting. This was not self-defense. It wasn't confusion. It was ego, wounded and exposed. The defense countered with an argument of shock and intoxication, insisting Marcus had reacted in a moment of emotional disarray. But from the first day, the jury sensed what this case was really about: control, pride, and the consequences of shame disguised as anger. Over the following week, the courtroom became a reconstruction of that final night. Jurors listened to recordings of Marcus's interrogation, his voice low but steady. "I panicked. I thought she was decaying." Forensic analysts explained the autopsy results that disproved his claim: a simple bacterial infection, medically treatable, nothing life-threatening. The pathologist stated, "There were no signs of decay, no parasites, no evidence of disease. The only cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head." The prosecution displayed photos of the bedroom, the broken lamp, and the shattered phone screen. Each image told a story that words could no longer soften. One juror later said, "You could feel the weight in that room. Every picture made you wish she had never opened that door." Marcus's defense attorney called a psychologist to the stand, arguing that his client suffered from an acute dissociative episode triggered by shock and alcohol consumption. But the cross-examination dismantled that theory quickly. So he was drunk enough to forget, but sober enough to buy a bus ticket, change clothes, and delete messages? The prosecutor asked pointedly. The expert hesitated. "That's possible." The prosecutor pressed again. "Or is it more likely that he knew what he was doing and just couldn't face what it meant?" That silence became one of the defining moments of the trial. Vanessa's family members testified about her hopes, her kindness, and her belief in redemption. Her sister Monica told the court, voice breaking, she finally believed she could be loved again. That was all she wanted. To be seen, not judged. When asked what she thought of Marcus, Monica said quietly, "He mistook kindness for weakness. But she was the strongest woman I knew." The gallery fell still. Even Marcus, for the first time, looked up. A tear rolled down his cheek, though it was unclear whether it was grief or shame. Throughout the trial, online discussions exploded across social media. People debated age gaps, emotional immaturity, and the culture of male pride. Some saw Marcus as a broken man who lost control. Others saw him as a reflection of deeper societal entitlement, men who confuse vulnerability with humiliation. One commentator wrote, "It wasn't love that killed her. It was the fear of not being enough." That sentiment echoed through forums and talk shows for weeks, becoming a quiet national conversation about what happens when masculinity turns defensive instead of accountable. On October 17, 2025, closing arguments began. The prosecution reminded jurors of the facts. He didn't call for help. He didn't try to save her. He left her on the floor and ran. The defense urged them to consider the human side of panic, portraying Marcus as overwhelmed and remorseful. But when the jury retired to deliberate, their minds were already made up. Less than 3 hours later, they returned. The foreman stood, voice steady. "We find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder." Marcus's mother, seated in the back, covered her face with her hands. The courtroom fell silent, except for the sound of Vanessa's sister quietly sobbing. The judge delivered the sentence: 40 years in a Texas state penitentiary. Marcus showed little reaction. When asked if he wanted to make a statement, he shook his head. As he was led away, the courtroom doors swung closed behind him with a sound that felt final. Outside, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Vanessa's sister faced the microphones and said, "She was brave enough to love again. He was weak enough to destroy her for it." Her words cut through the noise, replayed on every evening broadcast across the state. In the weeks that followed, the case became a point of reflection for many. Domestic violence advocacy groups cited it as a warning about emotional control and the dangers of shame-based violence. Psychologists discussed the link between fragile pride and aggression, emphasizing how cultural pressure on men to appear strong often prevents them from processing rejection or discomfort in healthy ways. One expert stated on record, "We teach men to build walls around their pain instead of learning how to hold it. He came to meet love and left a murderer." In the end, it wasn't fate or evil that ended Vanessa Taylor's life. It was pride, fear, and the human refusal to face imperfection. Some truths aren't born from monsters. They come from ordinary men who never learned how to live with shame. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps us bring more real stories to light and remind the world that love, respect, and empathy are never weaknesses. They're survival.